Announcements before we get to the main event for tonight. So first, I just wanted to welcome you all. I'm Cindy Rowe, and I'm chair of the Democratic Town Committee here in Brookline. And this is one of our most exciting nights, our candidate forum. So we have a couple of things to let you know before we get started. First of all, I did want to let you know that here at the Brookline Democratic Town Committee, we are all about electing Democrats at every level, the national, state, and local level. So we are going to be very busy for the next few weeks. From now to November 6th, we have lots of activities to keep you busy. So you may have heard about our Activist Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, we are working, making phone calls, doing texting, writing letters. We are doing it all to get people to turn out for our Democratic elections, both here and also something new. This year, we're also working for out-of-state congressional candidates to flip the House. So we are spreading our wings and moving far beyond Brookline and Massachusetts. We're going across the country. So you will hear about our volunteer opportunities to take part in all that and really make a difference across the state and across the nation. I have a couple of things to hand out, and since it's all about volunteering here, I could use about 4 or 5 of you to help me, because we have things to hand out, and I will tell you what those things are. So 4 or 5 of you, come up here. There's that, and there's that. And I could use a couple more of you. Here's that, and you can all share. So let me tell you what's being handed out. First, we have our Brookline Democratic Town Committee volunteer form. This tells us that you want to volunteer to do some wonderful activities over the next few weeks. So fill that out, tell us what you want to do. We'll send you reminders about what dates we're doing what activities. So that's the first thing you're getting. The second thing you're getting is a pledge form. We are part of an effort to collect 1,000 pledges to vote yes on 3, which is the question to defend the transgender public accommodations law. So we are part of an overall campaign to collect 1,000 pledges. So if you have not pledged yet, either from the email on the town committee link or from a form at one of our other events, please fill in that form tonight so we can count you as part of our 1,000 voters who are going to vote yes. And the third thing that you are getting is a file card. And you can get more of those, but those file cards are the way we're going to ask questions tonight. So I have pens up here if you need pens, and people are distributing those file cards. So you should all be getting 3 different things as my volunteers are handing them out. Let me tell you a little more about the format for tonight, just so we all know what's going to happen tonight. So for our first hour, starting at 7:15, about 5 minutes from now, we are going to have our candidates for the 15th Norfolk District for our state representative. And we have 2 candidates, 2 Democratic candidates for that position. We have Rebecca Stone and Tommy Vitolo. So we are going to get to question them, and they'll have to answer our questions, and we'll have a good time learning more about their positions. And that race, of course, is on September 4th, primary day. Then we are going to have at 8 o'clock, our candidates for the 15th Suffolk and Norfolk District. This is a district that only has 1 precinct in Brookline, Precinct 5, and the 2 candidates for that seat are going to come, and we're going to give them a chance to make a statement to us. And they'll come around 8 o'clock, 8:15, and then we're going to finish up the night with our candidates for Governor's Council. That is also a contested race this year. So we are trying to bring in all the candidates in our contested races so that you have an opportunity to hear from them. And those primaries are all September 4th, Tuesday, September 4th. So With that, I also want to remind you that as we look ahead to November 6th, there are other races that don't have contested primaries. Those races are for Treasurer, Deborah Goldberg, Attorney General, Maura Healey, and Auditor, Suzanne Bump. So those races don't have primaries for September 4th, but they will be contested for November 6th. So let's keep those in mind too. And obviously on September 4th, you'll be making your decision about governor and lieutenant governor and secretary of state. And those candidates we had come in the spring. So I think that we will have had all the candidates for contested races come through Brookline to speak to us and to tell us where they stand on issues. All right, with that, I think everybody got all those different forms. Please fill them out before you leave. You got file cards also. The file cards will be for when you get to put in your questions for the state rep candidates. So as these folks are talking, I'm going to give them a couple questions to lead off. I'm going to give them 3 questions to lead off, and we'll be collecting your questions as I am giving out these 3 first questions. So at the end of my 3 questions, hopefully you will have finished writing your questions. We'll have volunteers. Do I have a couple volunteers who will go collect the questions for me once they're written? 2 people, raise your hand. All right. You'll collect the questions, you'll bring them up here, I'll sift through them quickly, and we'll ask them a couple questions from the audience, as much time as we have allotted. All right, with that, I think we are ready. So, if anybody needs pens, I have plenty of pens up here to write questions, just so you know. Okay, with that, Rebecca Stone, Tommy Vitolo, take your seats. I also want to thank the guy who has the hardest job tonight. His name is Adam Chakoff. He is our new Brookline Democratic Town Committee organizer, and he is going to be the timekeeper. So, he's the guy with the signs. All right, in eye shot of our candidates. All right, all settled in? Ready to go? Okay. So we went over the format with the candidates before, and we're doing this all in alphabetical order all night. So this is the way it goes. So we're going to give them opening statements, 3 minutes each. So we are going to start with Rebecca Stone. So here you go. Thanks, Rebecca. Go to it.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you to the Brookline Democratic Town Committee for hosting this forum. Thank you all for being here this evening. With 2 progressive Democrats on the ballot, I keep getting asked the same question. What's the difference between the 2 of you? Despite similar politics, our differences in policymaking experience and knowledge, service to Brookline, and overall readiness for the job of state representative are substantial. I have deep and broad policy and legislative experience on a range of issues facing Brookline and the Commonwealth from a 30-year career in policy-oriented nonprofits. I also have a long track record of tackling tough problems and getting things done for Brookline as a member of the school committee for 12 years. From Tommy, you're going to hear a lot about his warrant articles and town meeting. I will put my record of getting things done for Brookline and my history of legislative and progressive policy achievement up against Tommy's list of warrant articles any day. After graduating from Harvard, I went to work for Ralph Nader in Washington, fighting for consumer and environmental safety and for campaign finance reform. After that, I was a congressional staffer for 2 members of Congress on foreign policy and human rights. We wrote legislation to prevent religious discrimination by American firms in Northern Ireland, supported Kim Dae-jung's fight for democracy in South Korea, and documented war crimes in Nicaragua. As a graduate student in public policy at Princeton, I worked with the Ford Foundation in Peru and supported health initiatives for mothers and children in Lima's barrios. In the decades since, I've advocated for gender equity and reproductive rights and worked to strengthen public systems and policy for vulnerable children, families, and communities. When my family moved here to Brookline 19 years ago, I jumped into the great civic life of this town by getting elected to town meeting in 2002. Then I ran for and served on the school committee. We made educational equity a core value, responded to 40% enrollment growth with expansions at Runkle, Heath, Lawrence, and the Coolidge Corner schools. We instituted world language starting in kindergarten and raised Brookline's average teacher salary from 20th in the state to 5th. Brookline needs a representative with that town-wide experience. Who knows what it means when the legislature passes a new mandate for the schools without the money to pay for it, or makes mid-year cuts to municipal aid and just says, deal with it. As your state representative, I will keep fighting for equity and human rights, for public education, for environmental safety and healthcare and housing that's affordable for families of all ages, sizes, and incomes. As representative for Brookline, I will be the knowledgeable, effective partner we need on Beacon Hill, listening to and working for everyone in this community. I hope to earn your vote, and I look forward to your questions.
Tommy Vitolo.
My name is Tommy Vitolo, and I'm a proud Democrat running to become Brookline's next state representative. I want to begin by thanking Cindy, Brookline Interactive Group, the thousands of people in this room, and the millions watching on television. I grew up in a working class community, went to college on scholarship, and after a graduate degree in Ireland, I enrolled at Boston University in a PhD program in systems engineering, and I moved to Brookline, where I plugged in immediately. I helped redesign Amory Park, I helped renovate the Brookline Community Foundation building, and I ran for and was elected to town meeting, our state legislature. And I have been an active town meeting member, drafting bills, helping my colleagues, and advocating for progressive outcomes on the floor. I've drafted 9 warrant articles on issues including public education, public health, diversity and inclusion, public art, the environment, and transportation, and all 9 have passed. I've done it by working with my colleagues across the political spectrum, by keeping an open mind, and by listening. And I believe that's why over 2/3 of our colleagues in our local legislature have endorsed my candidacy, as has a majority of the select board, Nancy Heller, Ben Franco, and Heather Hamilton. And Rebecca will tell you that we will vote the same, but the fact is we haven't voted the same as colleagues in town meeting. I am the only candidate who voted against the Hancock Village bill because, frankly, it was offensive. It was offensive to folks who are on low income. I was the only one who voted, I was the only one who voted to divest our pensions from fossil fuels, and the only one who voted to include electric vehicle charging stations in our building code. I was the only one who voted to make sure that we could have safe speed limits in front of buildings like schools, childcare centers, and the senior center. And I was the only one who voted with the Tobacco Control Bylaw Committee's recommendation in phasing out tobacco sales in Brookline. So Rebecca will talk about us both being progressive. The fact is our votes haven't been the same. And I believe that's why I've got such support from progressive organizations across the state and in our community. And I'll tell you more about that later, I'm sure. In the meantime, think about the fact that we need a state representative who listens, a state representative who works well with others, and a state representative with experience legislating, not sitting on the sidelines. Thank you.
So as I pose these questions, I remind you to start writing your questions on file cards as people will collect them. So first question, 3 minutes, 3-minute replies for you both. And this question goes to Tommy Vitolo first. As you have been talking to potential voters over the past few months, you have had the privilege of listening to people's concerns and what they need from their state government. Tell us about one or two of the issues that people are most passionate about in Brookline and what your plan is to take action on them in the legislature.
You bet. I've knocked on thousands of doors in this town, and I hear three things consistently. I hear social and economic justice, I hear public education, and I hear the environment. There are three places where we have relatively broad consensus on direction, and there are three places where the legislature has been slow to act. That doesn't mean it's been all bad. There have been good things to come out of the legislature, but we haven't done enough. And so on social and economic justice, yes, I'm talking about treating every single person in this Commonwealth fairly, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, immigration status. We're making progress. We haven't done enough. We need to keep doing more. An example is the Safe Communities Act, a bill that I would certainly support. On public education, we're actually spending less in real dollars at the state level on public ed than we were 15 or 20 years ago. That's not acceptable. It's also not okay that we're not funding pre-K and we're not supporting our state universities and colleges with the resources they need. To get there, I support the Fair Share Amendment, which was going to be on the ballot, but the Supreme Judicial Court pulled it off. That would be a progressive income tax like our federal tax, and it would tax folks who make more than $1 million a year to help pay for education and for transportation. And if any of you make more than $1 million a year, yes, I would like you to pay more taxes. And also, I'd like you to go ahead and make a $1,000 contribution to my campaign, the maximum. On the environment, I'm an environmental professional. I work every day thinking about how climate change and air pollution affect our population. I testify on this issue around the country, and I have no doubt that I can help bring expertise, real expertise, to the legislature rather than rely on lobbyists and activists on an issue that is, frankly, the most important long-term issue facing our planet. And so to get there, yeah, we need to cut carbon 80% by 2050. We'll do it with renewable energy. We'll do it with electric vehicles. We'll do it by changing over our heating system to air source heat pumps. And it's a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of programs. We're going to have to do it. So those are the three things. People talk about the odious president. People talk about transportation, specifically the T, and I think that's a part of social and economic justice. If you're in high school, it may be a part of transportation. It's certainly a part of the environment. And people talk about healthcare costs, which is in fact the largest part of our state budget and a real challenge that's going to take an awful lot of people working together to solve. I've got about 15 seconds left, so you'll have to ask me about it later.
Okay, the same question to Rebecca Stone.
So Tommy's right that everybody talks about the major issues. Certainly, the environment comes up tremendously. People are very concerned and should be concerned with global climate change. Can everybody hear me now? But the two issues that I have heard about from everybody without fail in North Brookline are about the affordability of Brookline and how it is escaping the middle class in Brookline, and how people, and especially seniors, are starting to struggle with being able to afford to be in Brookline. And I hear, especially from the Coolidge Corner and the core of the Norfolk 15th, about 40B and the pressures that Brookline is facing from, as we approach the 10% safe harbor, of developers pressing proposals in under the 40B because they are allowed to. And what we have now is an untenable situation where 40B, which was, the Chapter 40B was established 50 years ago to push affordable housing. It's a good law. It has actually achieved a lot of what it was supposed to achieve all over this state. But at this point, it is out of date. And in places like Brookline, we have a huge problem because it does not give the control to a place like Brookline, to a town like Brookline. Other places like Arlington are dealing with this as well. We are facing gross overdevelopment in the Norfolk 15th because of the ability of developers to take advantage of the affordable housing piece in order to press developments that are really too large for the district. So I hear from a lot of people in Norfolk 15th about what are you going to do about the 40B law. And I've written and talked to people and put out a newsletter on this, talking about what we can do in the state legislature to amend 40B, not so that we eliminate it because it's still a useful tool for affordable housing, but so that it can be amended to give more control to towns and cities who are subject to it, so that we can stop the queue, so that there aren't so many projects in the queue that we have to deal with, so that we can have more incentives to work with developers on affordable housing and housing that we need and can use 40B for. The other thing we talk about is the issue of affordability, which is not all about 40B. It is fundamentally about how we are overbuilding at the high end. We've had condo conversions and new condo development that is, again, we are at the mercy of the developers who are building only to the high end. Seniors can't afford to downsize within the community. Middle-class families in our community are being forced out because the costs are simply too high. When you multiply that, even with our reasonable tax rates, the property taxes are too high for a lot of people, and families are struggling. We have to change that. We have to do something about working with developers, again, to bring up the things that we have to encourage affordable housing.
Thank you. We are going to move on to our second question, and hopefully people are writing their questions, and you can start bringing them up to me. Thank you. Okay, next question. And this question, we will start with Rebecca Stone. So this question is, serving as a state legislator in the age of Trump has meant that we need to look beyond the borders of Massachusetts to protect our residents from dangerous policies on the federal level. As you think about serving at the State House, please name one or two Trump policies you think are the most dangerous and what you would do to protect us against them. Starting with Rebecca Stone.
I think the Trump presidency is dangerous to this country in all sorts of different ways. And it's not just about the federal policies that may come across our borders. It is about what is happening to American democracy. It's about what's happening to our political discourse. It's about civic engagement. It's about everything and everyone that I have been working on behalf of for the last 30 plus years in my professional career. One of the reasons I wanted to run for state rep at this point is because Washington is in fact a mess, and it has places like Massachusetts in its crosshairs, which means our state legislatures, which were already important to what happens in our everyday lives here, becomes absolutely the centerpiece of where we can continue to make progress, where we can protect some of the gains we've had, and Massachusetts can continue to lead on the many things where we have led before, and we can continue to lead. For me, the things that come to mind are what's happening with the Supreme Court nomination right now and reproductive rights. Number one, we've been very, very fortunate. We are fortunate to live in Massachusetts. We have passed lots of protections on the right to choose, the right to abortion, but there are other issues about access to health care in particular, and access to abortion, which may in fact be curtailed if we have a Kavanaugh court. The other thing I think about is gun safety. There's been a lot of talk about a federal level, allowing concealed carry permits to be federalized, and so they could come across state borders. We have the strongest gun control and gun violence prevention laws in the country in Massachusetts, but we can still strengthen them. We have banned semi-automatic weapons permanently. We are one of 3 states that allows its local police forces to take away guns from people if there is an extreme risk, which we also just passed this year. But on gun safety, we have to do more. I was on a call recently with Moms Demand Action, which is a fabulous group doing work on preventing gun violence, and they were talking about the use of guns and domestic violence. This is somewhere where Massachusetts can continue to strengthen what it's doing, and we are not going to get any help from the federal level. There are, in the United States, 50 women a month are shot and killed by a domestic partner. That is unacceptable. There are laws that we have yet to pass in Massachusetts that would let us address some of that, particularly for domestic partners who are not necessarily living together at the time. We have to do more. We have to look at gun safety, at what's coming from the federal level, and again, especially if we have Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, given his stance on the Second Amendment and the things that he is likely to favor coming from the Congress and the NRA.
And Tommy Vitolo.
Rebecca, I'm glad you bring up guns. I agree. I, too, am a Moms Demand Action gun sense candidate. In fact, I grew up in a town called Brookfield, Connecticut. The town next door is Newtown. My middle school was 5.5 miles from Sandy Hook. Kids I went to school with had children in that school on that day. This matters to me at a gut level, and I absolutely agree with my opponent. The state can do more, both with respect to domestic violence and also to the number one cause of death by gun in this state, suicide prevention. There's more we can do, and I'm all for it. With respect to Donald Trump, it's terrifying, right? And I think it's terrifying for two reasons. One, the vile, hateful rhetoric, right? But look, Archie Bunker was pretty vile if you watch him today, and that wasn't terrifying. What's terrifying is combining the rhetoric with surrounding himself with criminals, and in fact seeming to be immune from prosecution himself. And so I'm thrilled that Cindy brought up Flip the House. One of the things we can do in November across the country is attempt to find a group of folks, a majority, that will call Trump to task, at least some of the time. And so I'm thrilled about that. For what we're going to do in this state, for me, it starts with the Safe Communities Act, right? ICE is a disaster. ICE is downright destroying families in just a hurtful and unnecessary way, and not a dime of my state tax money should go to help them out. We shouldn't tell them where the bathroom is, right? So passing the Safe Communities Act, really important to me. Secondly, and I mentioned it earlier, look, on an economic level, Trump's cutting taxes for the rich and making it harder for us to fund social programs that are important for the rest of us. So what do? Well, in this state, we pass a progressive income tax. It requires a constitutional amendment. I'm all for it. And again, we go find money where the money is, folks making over $1 million a year, and we use it to fund at the state level the very social programs that the Trump administration is cutting at the national level. And finally, look, they call it the EPA. They're trying to burn it down. And we at the state level can do more to show leadership on environmental laws, both to protect our green spaces and to fight against climate change, so we can catch up with and join the ranks of places like California and Oregon and even New York, and demonstrate leadership as a group for this country to fight climate change in the decades ahead.
Thank you both. I have one more question I'm going to pose to the two of you, and then I am going to try to put every question that I have received into 3 more questions for these candidates. So let's see if I am up to the challenge. However, here is my 3rd question to you. This question goes first to Tommy Vitolo. Name 2 specific policies that you would support to move our state to more racial equality.
Sure. One obvious one is education. And here in Brookline, we have the METCO program, which helps students from Boston who are of low income get access to better education. But we need to do much more. By funding pre-K, particularly in communities where more kids come from broken homes, we're giving more and more kids the opportunity to start their education career on the right foot. We're also giving their caretakers, predominantly mothers and grandmothers, the opportunity 1 year earlier to focus on the rest of their family and its needs for 4 or 5 hours a day. That combination is really powerful and really important. And, you know, there's this rhetoric, fund education, it's the foundation of it. There's some truth to it. There's some real truth to it. Brookline's public education is remarkable. I'm proud to be in this town. I think we can still do better. We can add more classrooms. They're still needed. We can do a better job paying our paraprofessionals. But we're doing great in this town. We need to fund education statewide. It's not so much about changing policy. Most of it really does come from the funding. We've got to make sure that our budgets match our values. So that's first and foremost. And again, I've talked about it. I'm going to keep talking about it. The Safe Communities Act. The immigration policy, that's about racism. Let's just call it that. That's what it's about. Trump's administration using ICE to attack people of color is about racism. And we can't, in this state, stop ICE. But what we can do in this state is do everything we can to turn our shoulder to them, to not give them the resources to go after our friends and neighbors. It's not right, it's not appropriate, it's not safe, and doing nothing, as Charlie Baker has done, is not enough, because it's not making the message clear that we won't tolerate it, that it's not part of our values. We need to step up, and we need to say each and every day that all of our neighbors are important to us, and that we're going to listen to them, we're going to help take care of them, we're going to look out for each other. So, passing the Safe Communities Act, turning our shoulder to ICE, telling them to go take a walk, I think that's another way that we can step up and make progress towards equity across race, across religion, across gender, across veteran status, across age, across disability status. It's another way we can say we value everyone in our community.
Rebecca?
This is, as Tommy said, this is something, race and racism and equitable treatment of all people is something we need to work on every day, all of us as individuals and all of us as a community. One of my proudest moments in the school committee on my 12 years was when we did a strategic plan that elevated educational equity to a core value in Brookline. And that's just not words. It means that everything we do in the public schools after that happened was held to that standard. Every budget was held to the standard of whether or not we were looking at equity across all of our children. It means that every time we look at a program, particularly in the high school where there are lots of curriculars, we were asking as a school committee, what is the makeup of the class? How diverse are our classes? How diverse especially are our classes that are advanced classes? Where are we making progress on equitable treatment across race in our schools, and where are we failing to do so? We decided with educational equity to make that a question we asked of everything that happens in the public schools. And it continues to this day, and it needs to go on continuing because we have made some progress and we have a long way to go. We are actually losing diversity in Brookline because of one of the things I talked about earlier about the affordability of Brookline. We are losing racial diversity in Brookline. And one of the things that makes that harder in the public schools is if we have pressure also to eliminate METCO, which was pressure we came under when we did the override in 2015. When the other side on the override were saying we can't afford a program like METCO anymore. We don't have space in our schools for our METCO students, and we don't get paid enough by the state to have METCO programs. I fought that tooth and nail. I've been up to Beacon Hill repeatedly talking to our legislators about the importance of funding METCO and the importance of increasing funding for METCO to bring diversity into our schools, to allow our schools and our students to have diverse opportunities and to learn with students who look like the rest of the country and the rest of the world. We have to do that. The second thing we need to do is to look at our criminal justice reform. There is still a great deal we can do. There was a terrific comprehensive criminal justice reform passed, but frankly, the school to prison pipeline Other things having to do with mandatory minimums. Our prison system and our criminal justice system is still a fundamentally racist system. We have to stop imprisoning black and brown members of our society. We have to put programs that will allow them to come out of prison if they go there with actual skills that will allow them to rejoin society, and we have to do it now.
Okay, thank you both. Now, I am going to try to wrap many questions into one. So listen carefully, because this is about 4 questions in one. Here's your challenge. And the first reply on this question will go to Rebecca Stone. So here's what I'm trying to wrap together from these file cards. There are questions about revenue. We had the possibility of voting for a fair share tax amendment that got struck down by the Supreme Judicial Court, which would have funded transportation and education. So the start of this question is about revenue, whether you would support a fair share amendment if it were to come before you again, if there are other forms of revenue that you would support for the state, and to make the question fun, the piece about transportation, there's a few questions here about the T and what we can do to improve the T, and I'm going to segue that into climate change and the environment in general. So, there you go. Fair share amendment, revenue, the T, and climate change, all in 3 minutes.
You don't want 5 or 6? You want to stretch it?
Rebecca, you go first.
It's a floor wax. It's a dessert topping. Anybody remember that? Somebody remembers that. Thank you. I supported the Fair Share Amendment. I thought it was the right way to go. I was very disappointed, though not that surprised, that the SJC decided that it was not something that could be on our ballot. I fundamentally believe that the Supreme Judicial Court did that because they don't like the idea of amending our Constitution, which unfortunately is what we have to do in order not to have a flat tax in Massachusetts. So I would prefer not to reintroduce the Fair Share Amendment or introduce it in a way that needs to actually amend the Constitution, because I think we're going to have problems getting that through the SJC regardless of how it's written. I believe we have to have a legislature that is willing to look at raising revenues in other ways. I believe that can be done even with a flat tax. If we raised revenues across the board and then raised individual exemptions and other ways to protect the incomes of our low and middle income families, I believe it might have the same effect as what the fair share tax would have done, but we do it without having to change the Constitution, and I think we might be able to make progress on that. We need those revenues. One of the reasons we've had cuts in public education funding, in environmental funding, in funding across the board, aid to cities and towns, is because several years ago, we decided as voters, not in Brookline, but in Massachusetts, to cut our income tax down. We lost $3 billion a year in state revenues because of that. In terms of the T, we need to fix the T, but one of the problems with the T is that it is saddled with debt. The MBTA is saddled with $7 billion in debt that comes from projects like the Big Dig. And Charlie Baker so far has been unwilling, and the legislature, I gather, has been unwilling to consider taking that debt off of the T. 25% of the T's revenues now of their budget goes to servicing that debt. That's completely untenable. That is why we haven't seen the kinds of upkeep and regular maintenance that we need. That's why we have so many problems. We need to get that debt off of the T and spread it out across the state in ways that other budgets can absorb and afford. On climate change and what we're doing on the environment, again, it goes right to the budget. We have set tremendous goals in Massachusetts. We have set all the right goals about offshore wind, about reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. But we have to look at the budget. Everything ends in the budget. If it's not there, it's not a priority. And we haven't spent 1% of our budget on the environment for a long, long time. And that means we have been cutting the Department of Environmental Protection direction. We have been cutting the Department of Conservation resources. We simply don't have the staff to enforce the rules and the goals that we are setting. We can't clean up our Superfund fights. We can't enforce the goals on climate change that we have to meet. So we need the budget for that as well.
Thank you.
I'm just going to talk for 3 minutes. We'll see how it goes.
Go for it, Tommy.
As I said earlier, I support the Fair Share Amendment. I gathered signatures for it. I worked to get it on the ballot. We can pass it in the state legislature. We don't need the SJC's permission. It requires a constitutional convention and an amendment to the Constitution, and the SJC can't stop that. So we have the authority to do it, and I think we ought to. And yes, we need to take that money and invest heavily in the T. I ride the T to work. I know what it's like to wait 7, 8, 9 minutes in the rain, in the cold, for that green line to show up in the morning and then suck in and get on that first step and then lean in so the door can close behind you. I also know what it's like when you can't get on that step and then you wait 7, 8, 9 minutes for the next one, right? I even ride the bus over to Cambridge every day. So I know, I feel the pain, just as Governor Dukakis may have felt the pain riding to Beacon Hill every day. It's a priority for me. It was a priority for me in town meeting when I advocated successfully for $50,000 out of our $250 million budget to implement transit signal prioritization on the C line at Carlton Street, so the green line got the green light. And it turns out nobody noticed in cars, and it works for the T. The T is regularly 30 to 40 seconds faster as a result, and slightly more likely to be on schedule. We can roll that out along nearly every intersection on the C line, and there are proposals to do it. Of course, it costs money. What doesn't cost money is enforcing our environmental requirements on climate change, or rather, the money is such a small amount of money, and it's collected by the power plant generators themselves. So it actually doesn't show up on our budget. What's great about the 80% by 2050 carbon reductions is that on the electric side, it doesn't cost the state any money at all, and in fact, has very little impact on your electric bill. I wrote a bill in this town where we doubled our renewable electricity from 25% to 50%. It was implemented overnight. Nobody's lights flickered. Nobody noticed it. Your bill went up by about $2 a month, and since then, the electric bill that we used to get has gone up in price, so they're at parity. We can do this at the state level. It's actually not expensive. We just need to be willing to say to the power companies, both the distribution companies and the power plant owners, we're going to go a different way. We know how to do it. We've retired coal in this state. We are rolling out wind and solar. We need to do more. We need to lift the solar caps. We need to increase the renewable portfolio standard. And again, we need to transition to electric vehicles and transition to electric heat. We know how to do it. We know how to do it cost effectively. It's not going to be a budget buster on our homes, and it won't cost the state much of anything at all.
Okay, thank you for both so ably handling that multi-part question. So I am trying to pick out some more questions on topics we have not addressed yet. So here's the next one on a topic we have not covered yet. This question goes first to Tommy Vitolo. Last year, there was a proposal presented to the state legislature entitled Prohibition of Discrimination in State Contracts. This proposal is considered an anti-BDS legislation. It was supported by the Jewish Community Relations Council. It was opposed by the American Civil Liberties Union. What is your position on this proposal and why? So that first goes to Tommy Vitolo.
The nicest thing I can say about the boycott, divest, and sanction Israel movement is that it's misguided. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the only place in the Middle East that supports rights for gays and for women. And so to go after Israel, of all places, doesn't make a whit of sense to me. Some folks write books that say that, in fact, it is our foreign policy with Israel that results in bad outcomes for America. I don't buy it. Here's what I think. After living in Ireland just 2 years after the Good Friday Agreement was signed and spending significant time in Belfast talking with leaders from UUP, SDLP, Sinn Féin, the Republic, and the United States of America while I was there. And I want to be clear, the situation in Northern Ireland is not identical to the situation in Israel. There are many important differences, but there are some important similarities. What I learned from those conversations is that economic pressure or pressure of physical violence does not bring people to the table to look for peace. People come to the table to look for peace when they're ready to commit to a better future for their people and for everybody else. I believe that Israel can get to a two-state solution. I'm hopeful that it will happen. I think BDS inhibits that process. So what should the state do about it with respect to the so-called anti-BDS bill? It's not an anti-BDS bill. It's an anti-discrimination bill. The exact language of that bill, I don't know that it passes First Amendment muster. I'm not a constitutional scholar, and it's important to me that any bill we pass defend freedom of speech. I am optimistic that we can find a bill that says the state is not going to spend our money with companies that are discriminating on the basis of national origin, that is on the right side of the First Amendment. I look forward to working on getting such a bill to happen and being a leader along with reps from places like Newton and Brookline that have significant Jewish populations on this issue so that reps from other part of the state who don't have that kind of feedback and don't have that kind of investment in the issue in their community can follow suit and do the right thing and do our very small but important part toward making Israel a safer and more peaceful place for everyone who lives there.
And Rebecca.
I worked for 4 years on Capitol Hill for two members of Congress doing foreign policy. They were both very strong supporters of Israel, and I'm proud of the work that we did in those 4 years to support a two-state solution to try to move Israel towards a secure and lasting peace. This is an issue of foreign policy that is mostly, if not exclusively, handled at the federal level. On the BDS issue, I agree with Tommy. I think it is at best unfair to Israel. I think it is misguided, and I oppose the BDS movement. I don't think that discriminating against that sanctions and discrimination against an entire state is going to do anything to move us towards a two-state solution that we need. It's not going to do anything to give us peace and security in the Middle East. I would have supported, we may or may not have an opportunity to vote on another bill at the state level. The bill did not move anywhere after a couple of hearings on Capitol Hill. Cindy Cream, who's our senator, introduced it. I would be happy to support it if she wants to reintroduce it in the next session. But this is simply not something that is going to move us in a direction that's productive at this point. And I think everything we do as a country and a nation needs to focus on moving towards a stable peace in the Middle East.
Okay, now I have another creative question here to pose to you. So this question starts with Rebecca Stone. And trying to put together a couple different questions here, but not as complicated as the first one. Don't worry. This one has to do with Speaker DeLeo. And Speaker DeLeo is now the longest-serving speaker in Massachusetts history. The speaker has great power over the chamber. How would you balance the needs of your Brookline constituents with the need to work in an atmosphere where power is centralized? That's about the best I could do. I'm putting all of those together. And that starts with Rebecca.
So again, I'm no stranger to top-down political situations. Working in the U.S. Congress, you get used to the politics of power, you get used to the people who wield it, and you get used to systems that favor long-term service and put chair people in particular and speakers of the House in a lot of control. The interesting thing about the U.S. Congress and the U.S. House, where I served, is that there's actually a seniority system for things like committee assignments and committee chairs. In our House, in our State House of Representatives, the Speaker has complete power. The Speaker assigns every member of every committee. The Speaker assigns every chair, every vice chair. The Speaker invents new committees when the Speaker chooses and invents new leadership positions when the Speaker wants to give a little pay increase to someone in the House to reward them, because the pay increase that the House passed a little over a year ago was only for people with leadership positions. It was not for the rank and file, which Tommy and I would both be as starting out. So the Speaker has complete power, and that puts any member of the House, any new member especially, in an ironic position of having been elected by voters who we've been listening to and care about and want to represent, and going into a situation where the person you need to worry the most about is the Speaker of the House. That is a challenge. Like any situation where you have to work with a lot of other people and find common ground, the thing you do in a legislature is you start getting to know people in the House. You find your friends, you find the people you trust, you find the people who are interested in working on the same issues that you are interested in working on. And you start to build those coalitions, because those will be the people that you turn to work something through. Those are the people you're going to want to go together with to speak to the Speaker and to see if you can move something through. Working across the differences, and there are big differences in our House of Representatives in terms of priorities, but that's what you have to do. You have to work across those differences, and I believe you have to have a relationship with the Speaker where you've established what your priorities are, where you stand, and what you are willing to talk about and what you are not willing to talk about in terms of compromising your principles or your priorities. I am accustomed to doing that on many, many different issues. I am looking forward to doing that with the Speaker of the House, and I'm looking forward to working with my other colleagues in the House of Representatives so that we can have coalitions that speak power to power.
And Tommy?
So a few thoughts on the matter. The first is that the Speaker is about 1 year away from his pension being fully vested. That's an open secret. It's not clear if Speaker DeLeo will still be a member of the House 15 months from now. So there's an interesting opportunity, right? It's unlikely that he will not be voted. In fact, I'll say it a different way. It's extremely likely he will be voted by the members to be the Speaker at the beginning of the next session. But it's not so clear he'll even be a candidate in the session after that. So there's an interesting opportunity to find new direction for the House. In the meantime, the Speaker has this job where he's trying to protect all of the Democratic members of the House of Representatives. And so he's got a spectrum of Democrats, some from, in fact, most from more conservative districts than the 15th Norfolk. And he's looking out for them too. And that puts him in a squeeze. Do we go the progressive route and make it tough for other members to get elected? Or do we go the conservative route and really frustrate the progressives? And he's balancing that all the time. So what do we do about that? My style is to work with my colleagues in the legislature, again, across the political spectrum. It's what I've done in our legislature in Brookline. It's what I will continue to do. The reason that's important is that you can figure out, by listening to your colleagues, by keeping an open mind, by really working with them, places where you can bring them along. And as you get the votes, as you whip those votes amongst the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives and build a stronger and stronger coalition, a majority for your issue, the Speaker is more and more likely to let it get to the floor, since after all, he serves his members. He's elected by his members. It can feel very top down, but he has this job of taking care of all of his members. And so, working with the Speaker, you bet. That's the way it gets done. Fighting the Speaker at every turn, that's the way you're no longer able to advocate for your district. On issues like civil rights, I'll fight the Speaker tooth and nail, but we haven't actually seen an awful lot of bills in the House that would roll back civil rights. But on issues that are softer, sometimes you've got to take a half a loaf, survive another day, and keep working at your issue to get more later. That's part of being a legislator. That's part of having the wisdom of knowing when to compromise and when to hold fast. I've been practicing that as an active legislator at the town level, and I look forward to doing it at the state level.
Okay, thank you both. We have covered so many issues in this hour. It has been amazing. I really thank you both, and I thank the audience for providing such thought-provoking questions. We are now about to start our closing statements. So in reverse order of the opening statements, we will be starting with Tommy Vitolo. That will be 3 minutes, yes.
If you want to know what we'll be like as state legislators, you look to our shared history. The last 12 years, we've both been local legislators. That's what Brookline PAX did. PAX is a local political organization focused on peace, justice, and liberal policies since 1962. When they endorsed me, they cited my values and my record in town meeting. So too did Representative Frank Smisek. In fact, it was the comparison of our records as legislators that led to Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts and Progressive Mass endorsing my candidacy, as did groups of teachers, firefighters, construction workers, and healthcare workers. The Brookline Green Caucus is an organization that reviews warrant articles that have an environmental bent to help town meeting members understand what the pro-environmental vote is. They've made 28 recommendations on votes that were recorded. I voted with the Green Caucus all 28 times. My opponent voted with the Green Caucus less than half the time. I suspect that's why Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, and Environmental League of Massachusetts have endorsed my candidacy, as has the Massachusetts Organization for State Engineers and Scientists and 314 Action, a group of 400,000 scientists and engineers who are focused on making sure that science is a part of public policy. Social and economic justice groups are behind me as well, including the National Association of Social Workers and the Bay State Stonewall Democrats, an LGBTQ advocacy group. I've not just been active legislating. I've been a team player, supporting the bills of my colleagues and helping things get passed, listening to my colleagues, working with them, and I believe that is why over 2/3 of town meeting members have endorsed me, as have a majority of the select board. We need a legislator who knows how to listen to constituents and to colleagues, who knows when to compromise and when to hold fast. I'm the candidate with experience. I've got a proven track record in our local legislature. The election is September 4th. I ask that you request a Democratic primary ballot and that you cast your vote for me, Tommy Vitolo. Thank you.
And now a closing statement from Rebecca Stone.
A lot of us in this room are worried about what's happening in the country. We're worried about angry and even violent divisions. We're worried about the future of American democracy. With so much at stake this fall, choosing between two progressive Democrats for an open seat in a Democratic state legislature may not seem that crucial. But this is an important choice for Brookline. Today, with the shambles in Washington, our state legislatures are even more important because this is where we can protect the progress that we've made and continue to make and continue moving forward. Because Democrats have discouraged challenging a party incumbent, it's also the first time in 18 years that Brookline has even had a choice of Democratic candidates for state representative. Unfortunately, that old-school Beacon Hill norm also allows gross inequities in our legislature to persist. Although we're solidly Democratic, the House is 75% male and 90% white. The fact is, in boardrooms and in government, progress on crucial issues of safety, healthcare, and socioeconomic justice does not happen without more women at the table. We don't just need more progressives in the House. We need more progressive women. At the current rate of change, we won't see gender equity in our legislature until 2072. That's more than 50 years from now. No offense to the wonderful men in my life and in government and in this room, but that's outrageous. Next Tuesday, with a choice to fill a rare open seat, Brookline can be a part of changing that. But I hope I've been clear tonight. This is not just about voting for a woman. I am asking for your vote because I have more relevant experience and broader perspective on what it means and what it takes to represent Brookline in the state legislature. Because I will be a champion for children and families and for all those who have too few champions at the end of the legislative day. There were certainly too few champions at the end of this last legislative session. There was no action on crucial funding increases for struggling public schools, English language learners, and special education. There was no action on protecting immigrant and refugee families from the excesses and brutality of ICE. There was no action on tax relief for seniors so they can afford to stay in their homes. There was no action on protecting low-income communities from the ravages of climate-driven storms and flooding. There was no action on comprehensive sex education that Planned Parenthood has been trying to get through our legislature for 10 years. The families of Brookline, of the Commonwealth, deserve better. They deserve someone for whom they come first at the start of the day and for whom they come first at the end of the day. I will work tirelessly for you, for Brookline, and for all of them. Please vote Rebecca Stone on September 4th.
Thank you both so much for spending this time with us and for answering so many questions. We are very grateful that you are both running in this election. So now we are going to transition. I want to remind you all that you have Democratic Town Committee volunteer forms and you have question 3 pledges. So please fill those out and make sure we know how to get in touch with you and help us with that 1,000 pledge goal. We're going to take a minute or 2 break here and then we're going to bring up our next set. Okay, folks, we're going to reconvene. We're reconvening now for the Governor's Council candidates. Folks, if you can take your seat, we're going to bring up Governor's Council candidates, Marilyn Petito Devaney and Nick Carter.
I think we made eye contact, but I wanted to say hi. How have you been?
Okay, Nick Carter and Marilyn Petito Devaney, it's time for you to come up here. If somebody could bring up Marilyn also, that would be great. If you guys want to grab a seat up there. Okay, Marilyn Petito Devaney, are you out there?
Yeah, Wendy gave me that message.
Cindy, is there a way to stand up and talk or not?
Okay, folks, we are about to begin. Marilyn Petito Devaney, if you could come up and take your seat, that would be great. Okay, so we are going to start the second segment of our evening. The Governor's Council is a very important position. These are the folks who get to vote on judges. And we all know the importance that judges play in our society. The things that they get to rule on are very important to our laws. Folks, we are about to start. Excuse me, if you could all take your seats, we are about to start. I'd appreciate your attention to this. If you want to continue your conversations, please go outside this room. If you'd like to continue your conversations, please go outside this room. We have two candidates for the Democratic nomination for Governor's Council, and we've invited both our candidates here tonight to share with you their thoughts about this position, why they want it, and what they will do in this role. So again, we are going alphabetically, and this time we are starting with Nick Carter.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Brookline, for having us here. I'm Nick Carter. I'm running for Governor's Council. The Governor's Council, as some of you or maybe all of you know, 99% of the people I meet have no idea. They determine who our state court judges are. An incredibly important responsibility these days, but as I said, it's a little-known office. I'm a 25-year trial attorney. I have a lot of experience in the courts. I know what makes a good judge and a bad judge. I know what needs fixing in our courts. I'm also aware, as probably all of you are, that as Donald Trump moves our federal courts to the extreme right, I want to protect our state courts and Massachusetts values, like a woman's right to choose, like gay marriage and LGBTQ rights, like common sense gun control and environmental protection. Believe it or not, and it is hard to believe, some of these well-established rights are actually at risk now. And we really can't take anything for granted anymore. We probably all know that after the last 2 years. And so we have to protect our courts and take it seriously, because we don't know what's coming, and we need people in this office who are going to fight very hard to protect these rights no matter what happens at the federal level. And I'm going to do that. I also care about some other things. I care and I want to advance in this office things like criminal justice reform. We've just passed on a bipartisan basis an important criminal justice reform law. One of the things that does is to reduce the number of mandatory minimum sentences that we have on our books. Those are sentences where the legislature determines in advance, if you commit X crime, you will necessarily do a minimum amount of time that is spelled out by statute. That led to excessive incarceration, disparate impacts on poor communities, especially communities of color. I think you know the statistics, they're bad, and we need to reverse that trend. But we haven't solved the problem simply by passing this legislation. We have now put the discretion in the hands of judges who will determine what kind of sentences are imposed and whether we continue this pattern of excessive incarceration that we've been on for the last 40 years in the failed war on drugs. We need judges who understand that for drug addiction and mental health issues, people need treatment, and judges who will do their best to divert folks like that toward treatment rather than simply throwing them into jail as we've been doing for as long as possible. That hasn't worked. It costs $60,000 per year to incarcerate somebody. It's expensive, and folks like that, especially people with drug addiction or mental illness issues, end up just coming right back after they've done their time. The recidivism rate is high. So the program we've been on hasn't worked. We need the right judges who understand that and who will help advance criminal justice reform. Now, I want to say, with respect to the incumbent who has served 20 years, I appreciate her service, but I do need to spell out the facts and why I'm the right person and she is not the right person. So recently, she has joined Trump Republicans, including Howie Carr, Jeff Deal, Representative Jim Lyons. If you've been reading the papers recently, he's the guy who is bashing immigrants and gay marriage, and Charlie Baker has allied with him, and Jay Gonzalez is taking advantage of that appropriately. But the incumbent has called for people to join in Representative Lyons' effort to impeach a sitting Superior Court judge, Tim Feely, not because he did anything wrong, but because he imposed a sentence of probation on a first-time offender. That's an appropriate sentence. And to call for the impeachment of a sitting Superior Court judge undermines the courts, it undermines the independence of the courts, and when you're attacking judges for simply using their discretion to try to find an alternative to incarceration, that intimidates other judges, and that deters the effort to advance criminal justice reform. Now, in addition to criminal justice reform, I want to say, quite obviously, I'm a white guy and a lawyer, and I go into courts, and people look like me, those in authority anyway, and I understand that's a problem. I'm not trying to be a judge, but I want to help solve that problem. We need more women trial judges, and we desperately need more judges of color. Again, respectfully, the incumbent has been an impediment to bringing in new, diverse judges. Now, she will probably tell you a litany of people who she's voted for to a higher position in the judiciary. Someone like Chief Justice Roderick Ireland or Chief Justice Ralph Gants. These were rock stars already in the system. Our challenge is to bring in new people, to make new judges who will help our courts become more fairly representative of our community. It is an embarrassment how poorly represented the community of color is in our courts. We should be a leader. So I've got 1 minute. Let me just sum up by saying, or at least add to this, I've been endorsed by Attorney General Maura Healey. I've been endorsed by the last 4 attorneys general, including her. By the last 4 Middlesex County DAs, 85% of my district is in Middlesex. I've been endorsed by Representative Frank Smisek and Julie Johnson. I've been endorsed by the entire Brookline Select Board. I've been endorsed by Brookline PACs. And I want to thank Brookline, because Brookline, I took this leap to run for this office, and Brookline caught me and showed me that there is support for me. I had no idea if there would be. And Brookline really has been hugely helpful and encouraging in this run. I want to thank Brookline for your support. I need a big win in Brookline, so I hope you will tell your friends about me, about the importance of this office, and the importance of all those endorsements. I'm going to wrap up right now. The importance of all those endorsements is that people understand it's time for a change. We need a new counselor, and they believe that I will do a good job. So thank you very much. Hope to have your support on Tuesday. Thank you.
And now, Governor's Counselor Marilyn Petito Devaney.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very honored to be a governor's counselor, and I'm asking tonight for your help on September 4th so I can continue to work for you. Unfortunately, my opponent is running a campaign, a smear campaign on lies. I have never met with those Republicans that he named. If they walked in here, I wouldn't even know them. And on that Judge Feely incident, I was working with Democrats, Representative Donato and Gentile, and many of them, and because the judge had said to the drug dealer, if you were a citizen, I'd put you in prison. But you're not a citizen, so I'm going to give you 2 years probation. You're providing for your children. So these Democrats wrote a letter to the Commission of Judicial Conduct, and they asked, and I supported it, to ask that Judge Feely not have any criminal cases until they have a public hearing, but they didn't. So this is total lies, Trump or whatever, fake lies. But and it's very hard to counter all of these lies. I have a proud record of diversity in women. And by the way, we don't choose them. It's 21 lawyers who are the Judicial Nominating Commission who are appointed by the governor, and they interviewed and they give us one person to vote on. I fight for diversity. My opponent has never come in 25 years to the Governor's Council to support a judge. But just recently, I have voted for 2 outstanding women who happen to be of Indian heritage to the appeals court and district court, an Indian American man to the housing court, a black woman to the district court, a Hispanic to the district court. And I mean, this is all lies, and it's so hurtful. I'm proud of my record. I have voted for the majority of women on the SJC, first time, and the most diverse, first black, first Jewish Chief Justice, first openly gay, first Asian. And I'm not, this is a terrible thing to be attacked like this. And you know, he even has contacted people who endorse me, Congressman McGovern, and a sheriff to representatives, and he called Representative Gregoire 3 times, and when they say they're supporting me, then he slanders me, even my personal friends. I have never seen anything like this before. I'm not a lawyer. He can go, if he's elected, he can go before the judges who he votes for. It might be legal, but it's wrong. And, you know, I'm just thinking he raised $180,000, mostly from lawyers who want to be judges. He's prosecutor friendly. He's got support from all the former and present prosecutors. I support people, Bay State Stonewall Democrats, professional firefighters, NAGE, the Carmen's Union, representatives and Mayor Walsh, and many, many more. I can't name all of them. I wouldn't have time. And they believe in me, and they're standing with me. But this, I've never seen a campaign like this. And I'm asking you to look at the facts. There's a letter that someone wrote and said all of the things he said in the flyer that were lies. He said, I voted no on a Jennifer Roberts. This person never came before the council. And then he says, I vote against women. I've told you that. And I have a 100% record. I interview every nominee from judge, parole board, industrial accident board, appellate tax board. I don't take travel pay because you don't get paid to drive to work. And I'm at every hearing. And I think it's very important because I have the time. I'm not going to be in court. I'm not representing lawyers. I'm representing you. And, you know, this wasn't his first choice. He wanted to be Senate. He started a run against Senator Cream, our wonderful Senator Cream, and he was discouraged. And so then he figured, Governor's Council, 32 towns and cities, the odds are better. I only want to be your counselor. I work hard at it. I'm the only person that is full-time. I do a lot of investigating. I go to parole board hearings. I meet with former inmates. I've gone into prisons. I have testified against minimum mandatories, and he keeps saying I talk for it. They're lies. And I've never met with these Republicans. I don't even know who they are. I want to talk about what I have done in my endorsements, who I am. And that's what this is all about, because I feel you have to represent people, not lawyers, not the governor, and I have taken on the governor. And the thing is, we don't choose. And that's the whole thing you've got to know. We got one person to vote on. We just had the most outstanding woman for housing court. And do you know what? The Judicial Nominating Committee had rejected her 4 times. This is her 5th time to apply. I thanked her. But the Massachusetts Constitution gives the ability to the governor to choose. I fight for diversity. We need more women. I just voted for the 4th woman in Middlesex County in juvenile court in the history of the court. There's no one that fights more. I want pardons. Baker has got 0 pardons. Patrick had 6. So I'm saying they have the power, but I'm there fighting, and I've taken on the governor. And I'm not a rubber stamp. And when I vote no, I can tell you just cause why I did. He's not telling you why councilors vote against, or me, because I have a wonderful record, proven record. And I don't want to be, when did you stop beating your kids? This isn't the position I want to be in. I want to tell you what I've done, and I want to continue to work for you. And I love what I do, and I have the same enthusiasm and the same dedication as when I walked into that office. So I'm asking you, if you will give me your support again, I will never let you down. I'm representing you. Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us tonight, and I am sure you will be available if people have questions out in the hallway.
If they have any questions, I love them. I love
However, we do need to proceed to our final contested race for the evening.
Okay.
So I'd like to call up our state representative candidates for the district that includes part of Boston and a part of Brookline, the 15th Suffolk and Norfolk district. This district includes Precinct 5 in Brookline, and we have a contested primary in this race, too. We have 2 Democratic candidates, so I would like to call up Nika Elaguardo and Representative Jeffrey Sanchez. And we are going to give them an opportunity to each give us 7-minute statements, and we are going to start off with Nika Elaguardo. And when you take your seat and you are ready, feel free to get going. And our timekeeper will keep track of our 7 minutes. So thank you both.
Thank you so much for having me. And as most of you who have met me know, I'm just so excited about the opportunities in Massachusetts right now. I like to say sometimes, I'm sorry if you're hearing it for the 3rd or 4th time if I've knocked on your door. It's like Donald Trump sucks all the positive energy out of the air and sets it on fire. And so it can be hard to see that this is one of the most exciting times in Massachusetts political history, I think, in at least 20 years. Now, the reason I say that is I worked as a senior policy advisor at the State House on the Senate side about 10 years ago. And then moving forward, especially justice-oriented legislation was like moving legislation through ice. You might have 10 provisions of a criminal justice reform bill, and you might move one of those provisions through in 4 to 6 years. Since the election of Donald Trump, the Senate is on fire. They are focused. They have unanimously passed landmark leadership legislation in education and in climate change. And they've pushed through important protections for immigrants in the form of a bill that we have been working on for 6 years. The majority of the House will support these bills, and in the case of the education bill, had signed on to it. And, I want to thank Rep. Sanchez for being here. It is a competition. I have absolute respect for Rep. Sanchez and actually affection, but I was quite disappointed when Rep. Sanchez sent a letter to the reps asking them to withdraw their support. And you can see that letter on my website, on electnika.com. Now, I understand the leadership model that our House leadership, including our rep, is working on. And to be honest, as an individual, especially woman of color, I've been proud of Rep. Sanchez for mastering a game that has generally been excluding of people of color, and even of most white people, to be honest. There's a small subset of people who have been allowed to play this game of ingratiating yourself to so-called powerful figures in corporations and getting goodies in return for your district. Now, Rep has mastered that and is good at it, and a lot of the leadership is. But the problem with that is it's a game we can no longer afford to play. We need to lead in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has been a leader for centuries. The nation depends on our progressive spirit to lead each stage of our very young democracy to its next level. From our Constitution, which, as many of you will know, framed the framework for our United States Constitution, public education, public transit. We were the first to integrate a number of professions, nursing, judges. We were the first to integrate places of faith. We were the first to bring legal services to elderly and to low-income people. My first job out of college was managing a statewide foreclosure prevention program for the National Consumer Law Center in the mid-90s when banks did not help people stay in their homes. We crafted in Massachusetts the framework for keeping people in their homes. I was one of the people running the math and managing the statewide program that kept 88% of the people in their house. And we were requested to provide written testimony to Congress for that. I was one of the people that helped to craft the behind-the-scenes math for the percentage of income payment plan that helped elderly people and low-income families keep their utilities, because back in the day, if you couldn't afford to pay your utilities, they got shut off unless you were part of a special program. Massachusetts has been leading forever on these types of issues, and I have been privileged to be at the forefront of especially leadership innovation. I've been a trainer in leadership. I did go back to the Kennedy School to hone my skills in negotiation and later to law school to understand corporate social responsibility. But most importantly, on the streets and communities, I've been back where I came from, so to speak. I grew up in neighborhoods where having a champion was critical to my survival. There was poverty in my family, violence and crime inside my house and outside of my house. But my dad, at a very young age, said to me, Nika, I was 7. Right now you're faster and stronger than the boys, but that's not going to last. I need you to be able to protect yourself. He taught me a right jab and a left hook, and I hated it because I was a tender-hearted kid. And he made me stand in the mirror and practice, and I had to use it. And sometimes it was enough, and sometimes it wasn't. And when it wasn't, it was because other champions would pull me out from literally under the bush where I had been dragged by some boy with bad intentions. These are common experiences for girls and boys in places like where I grew up. Now, I recognize and love that Rep. Sanchez also grew up in tough communities, and I'm so proud and happy that he has such amazing parents that were stable. Mine were not, but they loved me, and they taught me how to survive, not only how to fight physically, but how to fight for my rights. When I was in high school, it was the 9th school I went to because we were getting evicted all the time, and for other reasons of parent craziness. I was plucked out of a school where a lot of kids were literally dying. HIV was a big problem then. This is the 80s. And there was a lot of violence against girls. I was plucked out of that 8th school. The 9th school was a Columbus School for Girls, a 100-and-something-year-old private school. I thought this was the most unfair thing. I said to my teacher, listen, this education is amazing. Every kid in my neighborhood should have this opportunity. And she said, the kids in your neighborhood don't deserve this school. Now, if it had been the only voice speaking in my life, I might have walked out. But in fact, there were so many champions that I did not hear that. I heard, you will be a change maker. Because that is what I have been told by so many champions. Now, Rep. Sanchez did say, one of the 2 reasons often proffered by leadership why we don't pass things. We don't have consensus, we can't afford it. I will say that we could afford to give $500 million in tax credits to biotech industries over 10 years. We can make different decisions. We can absolutely afford it. I'm an MIT girl. And I love me some biotech. And I had to work my way through college in the Career Services Center. I can guarantee you biotech is coming. But the dollar spent on education is going to help a girl like me go through MIT, Harvard, and get their JD, or go through carpentry school or whatever it is that they need to do. And a dollar to biotech is a waste of our money, along with the other $1 billion a year in corporate money that we do.
Thank you very much. And now to conclude our evening, Representative Jeffrey Sanchez.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the committee for allowing me to come and present today. So first and foremost, I grew up down the street on the corner of Ward Street and Route 9. And back in the 70s, when the hospitals when the hospitals weren't essentially opening doors to poor Puerto Rican and black people, they essentially closed. Children's Hospital had a closed door during that time. Not only that, we grew up in pretty decrepit housing over there. And I saw something big in my house. I saw a woman who didn't like what she saw. And she took on the challenges of the day by talking to her neighbors. And in that, she challenged the status quo. And that was the example that I had in my house. So much so that they challenged and won, and the community was able to keep the Mission Maine housing projects open. And you see what a beautiful community it is right now, and you see the great things that we have from one corner of this district, from Mission Maine to Jamaica Plain to here to Brookline and Rosendale. And I had an incredible role model in my house, but I had failings as a child growing up. You know, I saw a lot happen to me, from busing to the Stewart murder to so many things. You know, but during that time, you know, there's a student over at the Umana Tech in East Boston where I used to take a bus to, go to Umana every day, take an hour and a half, on the elevated line, and it was a lot. I went to Roxbury Community College. I went to UMass Boston. It took me 20 years to finish the degree, but I did it. And then later, I applied to every law school I could find, and guess what? I didn't get not into one. And then somehow, some way, I got accepted into Harvard, the same way that my opponent got accepted as well. But this isn't about the pedigree. This isn't about how much education for me. It's about essentially what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. I have my experiences as a child growing up, my experiences working in city government, being a legislator and working with so many others. And I am the first and only OG progressive. Okay, I am an old guard progressive. Before it was a term, we coined it, and it was relative to equality. And how do we make sure we stand up for equality? At the time, there were places, like schools and groups that were talking about, we shouldn't talk about same-sex marriage. We should talk about civil unions. But guess what? I was one of the original 10 that pushed to make sure that equality exists in a strong way. And we've moved a progressive democratic agenda forward. I'm the first Latino, the first Puerto Rican to chair the Committee on Ways and Means this year. And I'm there to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table. Poor, brown, everybody, those especially who have no voice. Because I know what it means to not have a voice, from where I come from down the street. And guess what? I had the opportunity to work with members to write a $41 billion budget that invests in people. And when the governor wanted to shift people off of mass health, the working poor, I was able to stop it with the support of the membership. Because the legislature doesn't work in a monolith. It works as a collective. And I know that there are folks that may feel that it comes from the top down, but it doesn't. We work together. And that's what we do every single day. In this budget, I made sure to lead the effort to increase access to health care and make coverage more affordable. We lead the nation continuously. John McDonough, who worked for Ted Kennedy, that wrote the ACA, and that I worked with during the time when we were working on health care reform, who's endorsing me, is proud, and I'm proud, that we've been able to keep 98% of our people insured in the Commonwealth. We've passed the strongest state gun safety laws in the country, including a ban on assault rifles and bump stocks. We also make sure that immigrants are protected in the budget, and we do so in a major way. And you know how? By making sure that the Republicans don't try and chip away and try and take away health benefits and try and take away housing and try and take away access to education, finance. And not only that, we pass language that does something specific. It makes sure that unaccompanied minors, that the courts take responsibility for them right now. And it's a big deal. And I've led on clean energy, and we've paved the way. I voted for the Global Solutions Act, where we paved the way for the largest offshore wind farm in the country. And it's moving us towards 100% renewable energy. And here in Brookline, in working with so many of you, I was able to get a commitment for $750,000 for the Brookline Community Mental Health Center, bringing in for the Healthy Lives program. And another thing that we spend the time in over with the folks over at the Veterans Housing Development over on High Street. My entire time that I've been in office, I always make sure that I work with my community there. I feel so much because I'm a part of that community, and I share that background growing up in public housing. And there's a lot more to do. Fully fund education. This session, we shot up education anywhere from 9 to 35% in so many accounts by recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission. And not only that, we ensure access to community health care in so many ways by making sure that Mass Health is strong. And not only that, a $1.8 billion housing bond bill, which we passed, that is going to tackle the issue of affordable housing and dramatic increases in all of the housing items. We established a $5 million line item to deal with chronic homelessness with organizations like Pine Street Inn and other organizations in the western part of the state. I'm trying to make sure that I keep my eye on the prize. And I always do. And at the end of the day, that prize is making sure that the vulnerable have a voice. And I've been that voice for a long time. And in this role that I have now, I'm able to do so much, and I'm proud of what I'm able to do in terms of building bridges with everyone. I can go and I can set myself on fire 50 million times. But you know what? Bridges aren't made to burn. They're made for everybody to come together. And they're able to, so that we can find solutions in a really meaningful way. Not to just throw bombs, not to discredit, not to disrespect. We have to build bridges with people, and that's what I've been my entire career. So I'm humbly asking you for your vote on September 4th so I can continue serving all of you, especially the most vulnerable in our community. On day one, I'm not stopping. Thank you.
Thank you both, and thank you all for attending, and thank you all, and please remember to go out and vote on September 4th.